Hey guys, I'm Papa Pete, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a book review. I'm going to do a book review on something that I supported on Kickstarter last summer and fall, and received not too long ago. Matter of fact, I showed it to you during my last pickup video. And today's review is Hidden Gaming Gems, Generation by Generation by Jeffrey Wittenhagen of Hagen's Alley Books. So stick around and I'll tell you what I think of Hidden Gaming Gems.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't grown up by the age of 50, you don't have to.
I first met Jeffrey back in 2016 at Too Many Games down in Oaks, Pennsylvania, and I could tell not long after meeting him, and we sat and talked for 15, 20 minutes, I don't know, it might have been a half hour, and one thing I could really see is how much he had a passion for retro video games, and how much knowledge he had, and how much he loved to talk about the things that he knew, and just discuss things with people. And at that time, I bought a couple of the books that he had already produced that weren't currently on Kickstarters, and picked up stuff like the complete NES guide and one of his 1990 retro looks at different things in video games, video game culture, pop culture. And I really enjoyed those books. So ever since then, I've seen him at Too Many Games since. Now, he wasn't there last year, but he was in 2017 again. And I've been watching what he does and talked to him online quite a bit with the different books he creates. And when he brought this one out, which was Hidden Gaming Gems, it was sort of a special one that he created last year. He had actually started this book several years ago, and he had a publisher in Europe. He explains this in the foreword of the book. He had a publisher in Europe that went bankrupt, went out of business. He lost his book. He did get a rough PDF, but it never really became the finished product that he wanted. So he took the time several years later, and he produced this book of Hidden Gaming Gems, and he broke it down into different generations, right from way back the day of Pong, right up through the modern generation. That's the PS4, the Xbox One, Wii U, even the Switch. There's also a section highlighting some great homebrew games. Be sure to check that one out. So first, let's talk about the layout of the book. Well, the book is 464 pages, tons of material. But at the same time, something that I really like, old guy like me, is the print is really big. Each game has about 4, 5, 6 pages dedicated to it with lots of really colorful illustrations. And it's all broken down, like I said before, as each generation goes. So like first generation of things like Pong, the Magnavox Odyssey. Generation 2, which I'm sorry to say is my generation for starting video games, the Atari 2600, things like the Apple II, the Commodore 64, even the VIC-20. I don't know the VIC-20 games in here, but right up through like your NES years, your SNES years, up to your PlayStations, your Dreamcast, your Wii's, right up to the PS3, Xbox 360 of the 8th or 9th generation. Anyway, he takes each game. The games are things that you may have heard of, but aren't as mainstream as many of the other games. It's things that you may or may not have played. Either you loved them, you played them, or maybe just never heard about them at all. And you know what?
What?
I really like the fact that anybody can pick up this book, no matter what their knowledge of video games is. If you have a great knowledge of video games, 464 pages, you're still going to find games that you weren't familiar with. That being said, if you aren't all that familiar with video games, you're going to have a really good time learning a lot about some great games. One thing that I really like is a little trick he pulls. He leads off every new generation of gaming with an old classic advertisement from that generation. Whether it's Commodore 64 or NES or whatever, he'll have a print ad from that generation. It's really a neat idea to do. Now, Jeffrey brought in a lot of contributors to this book. He didn't do it all himself. He got a lot of different people, well-known people from the retro gaming community, to provide some of their insight on some of the games and let them pick the games that they wanted to put in the book. So there's people that you've probably heard of, like I think there's like 18 different contributors to the book besides Jeffrey. And guys you know, like John Lester, John Hancock, lots of other guys that you probably are very familiar with. and are very knowledgeable about retro games and can find these great hidden gems. Now, how about the actual content itself? Now, I did mention already about how the print's nice and big, the colors are nice and bright. It really is a pleasure to read in that regard. But what does it actually say? Well, it's not a super technical book. It's not a book to give you all the information and background about each and every game that's in here. It's more of a casual conversation explaining general things about what makes the graphics good, what makes it sound good, and really what makes the gameplay good, and why you should try out these games that probably were missed the first time around. So what's my overall take on the book? Well, one thing that is absolutely for certain when you look at this book, Jeffrey has a true passion for video games, for retro video games. And this is a true labor of love. All of his books have been labors of love. He puts his heart and soul and all of his focus into them. And it really comes out in the final product, whether it's hidden gaming gems, generation by generation, or other things that he's done, such as the complete NES book. Okay, there's also the complete SNES collector's book and ultimate guide, or even something along the lines of this, which is Video Game Culture Chronicles from 1990. That's a really interesting thing too, just talking about different things in that year. Anyways, I highly recommend you take a look. Go to www.hagensalley.com, look at some of his books, take a look at Hidden Gaming Gems, Generation by Generation. I really think it's worth your while and you'll get some enjoyment out of it. I'm Papa Pete. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time, guys. Take care.
Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. Papa Pete, the old ass gamer. If you haven't grown up by the age of 50, you don't have to.
The old guy gamer.
What the hell?